Hey everybody, my name is Jorge Herrera, and it is an absolute honor and a privilege to be here with you at the Christian Game Developers Conference 2022. My talk is titled Video Games as Places of Faith, and it's a theological talk based on my own research and study and experience of video gaming. So right now I live in Manchester, England. I have an undergraduate degree in theology from Nazarene Theological College, and I am doing a master's degree in practical theology. I work in prison with young people, and I am involved in ministry at my local church, Message Community Church, and I do video game ministry through esports and other things. And so I've always worked with young people, and I've always enjoyed playing video games. And when I found out that actually Christianity, Christian spirituality, and video games have a lot to do with each other, I began to study that formally, and it's just been an absolute blessing on me and my family's life. And so I want to share this research with you, and I hope that it will inspire Christian game developers and gamers alike everywhere. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. So video games have gone from pointless or mindless entertainment to unique experiences with huge budgets, teams, insights from the field of psychology, religion, and spirituality, and more, and our complicated systems. They are now digital environments where people are learning about Christianity and accepting Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior through different ways of engagement. Video games are a central feature of contemporary culture, and according to statistics provided by Digital Schoolhouse in the UK, 99% of 0 to 8-year-olds play video games, 70% of 9 to 18-year-olds play video games, and the governing body for video games in the UK, called UKI, reports that a little bit over half of all adults in Europe play video games, and 45% of those being women. These statistics are significant considering that video games have only existed for about 50 years, and the number of users is going to continue to rise. If you contrast this with the Church of England, so the state church of the UK, they recently reported that sadly over half of their churches do not even have young people in attendance. This indicates a sharp contrast that video games seem to be capturing the hearts and imaginations of young people, while the church has been ineffective in serving the younger demographics with dynamic content that are culturally or socially relevant. That's not to say that video games are in direct competition with Christianity. Christians have a long tradition of engaging with culture. There are theologically reflective paintings, carvings, and sculptures, as well as medieval passion plays, and now film and TV series, which have provided believers with theological education and spiritual experiences. According to Jill Stevenson, these engagements with culture lowers the barriers for entry for new users. Furthermore, Joe Kinchleo coins the term Christiantainment, which he explains as a process through which evangelical Christians appropriate and sell Jesus through modern media forms in order to evangelize children and young people. Christians have a history and tradition of engaging with culture and media forms for the sake of evangelism, and video games are simply one of the newest forms of media, one that we should master and use appropriately as Christians have historically done. Taking this into account, the Christian video game market has grown and evolved. Video games are no longer as simple as Pong or Tetris, or, in the Christian context, Captain Bible and the Dome of Darkness. We are now dealing with powerful digital experiences. It is important that we as Christians know what we are dealing with and why it's important to take. Now, take, for example, the Christian game That Dragon Cancer, created by Numinous Games. Their video game design includes combining an emotion-based game design with insights and concepts of Christian spirituality, such as the poetry of the Psalms, meditation, and reflection through lighting candles in a church. Andy Robertson and Alistair Jones have reported in their pamphlet that while running a group session and having people play that Dragon Cancer, that gamers said that they felt God's presence. And so by incorporating spiritual elements into meaning-making moments, they have forged an entirely new video game experience, effectively drawing people closer to God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. They've won numerous awards, received global recognition, and the game has been streamed by millions of times by secular users. And it's actually being used in seminaries in the United States to teach pastoral care. A lot of the people from Numinous Games, they're part of the Christian Game Developers Conference community. Looking at another game now called Journey, which is a really, really popular game. In an interview with IGN, the lead designer, Genova Chen, says that he consulted with a spiritual psychologist and incorporated elements of Buddhism and Christianity into his game design, again contributing to the popularity of the game and users widely reporting that they had a spiritual experience while playing the game. This is suggestive that elements of Christian spirituality and video games combined create powerful spiritual experiences for gamers. And it's an interesting point to highlight with Journey that as I studied gamers' responses to Journey, one of the recurring themes that kept arising was the emotion awe. Now, awe as an emotion is very interesting. It's a human emotion that could lead to fear, but it is almost always a positive emotion, and it's an amazement, right, or wonder. That's kind of what awe is, but it's always in relation to a higher power or God. The emotion awe can be found in the natural world through witnessing great natural landscapes such as the Grand Canyon or the vast night sky. Religious artists have created pieces where awe is felt by simply looking at the paintings. And a good example of this for me personally is Henry Oshawa Tanner's The Annunciation. It evokes a sense of awe in me personally when I look at this painting. And another way that awe is felt in the natural world is through religious ritual and the sacraments, right? So through communion, baptism, prayer, and worship, often we have a sense of awe when we participate in religious rituals like these. But in video games, it's traditionally done through vast landscapes like deserts or mountains, or from high vantage points, through huge armies, and through meaning-making moments. Researcher Daniel Posner has investigated this phenomenon in games, and he says that video games can reliably deliver and evoke a sense of awe in gamers, which means that like whenever game designers want to, they can incorporate in the mechanics. They can basically make people feel awe on command. And this is done regularly. So it doesn't really matter how many times you play a game. It's not going to diminish over time, which is really interesting. And so there are games that evoke a sense of awe in a non-religious way, such as Halo and Fallout 76. However, this is done to add an entertainment factor and replayability of the game. The inclusion of psychological concepts in video games such as flow, which I've not really spoken about here, but in this case awe, have to be questioned. Is it okay for people to be put in a perpetual state of awe in video games, making the normal, everyday, out-of-game life experience even more mundane and boring? Or can Christian game developers create games and use it responsibly to point towards Jesus Christ? Can we use video games to reveal God's glory, and can we allow video games to fulfill their true purpose in revealing God's glory? Another good example of video games being places of faith in a non-Christian context is it's a new game called Raji. And Raji is based on Indian mythology and Hinduism. And in an interview, one of the game developers, he said that he was visiting an Indian religious holy site. And while he was there, he was just looking at the complexity of the architecture of the place and thinking about the inspiration, where he says that he had a spiritual experience. He had a holy moment. And he got the inspiration to create Raji from that moment where he said he was looking at this site and he says, wow, I should make a video game out of this. And he did. And so the team has incorporated, Hindu mythology, theology, and a lot of the artwork is based on Hinduism into their game. And it's actually led to it being very, very popular. And people haven't really reported having spiritual experiences while playing Raji. But what they have said is that they've come out of that game with a new respect for Hinduism and wanting to actually look into it and research it more on their own because of playing the video game. And that was due to a spiritual experience that one of the game designers had, which I think is really interesting. But going back to the focus of this talk as video games and places of faith, that through my own research, I conducted talks and interviews with several video game developers, which interact with the Christian game developers community online. And a common theme arose across all of my conversations. All of these developers were inspired by their Christian faith to develop games. Most of them never really studied game development formally, but it was their inspiration. They had a holy moment that led them to want to communicate a message to their children, to the world of gamers through video games. And so the creation of games is being inspired by God and His Spirit. And additionally, there is an uptick of Christian video games that are being developed and being ready for release. So a couple years ago, maybe this really wasn't the case. It was rare to find this number of Christian titles at this quality, this level of quality. And so some teach that Christian beliefs, some of these games that are being released teach Christian beliefs and stories through fictional or allegorical stories. And in others, you become the biblical characters themselves. And I think it's such a good thing, and I think we have to encourage these developers to further develop this field and spread the good news of the gospel. I want to switch gears a little bit for a moment and look at games, but for younger audiences. So looking at games for children on mobile. So if you look at the top 3 children's Christian game apps available for mobile, the ones I looked at were Sun School, Bible app for kids, and Superbook, which either have features of gamification, mini games, or have video games in them. And I call these all video games because of those features of games and gamification. But these combined have over 55 million downloads. The organizations that operate these apps have metrics and mechanics embedded into them that encourage the users to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. One of these apps in particular shared the statistics with me, showing how many children have accepted Christ through their app. And using these mechanics, they boast a 30% success rate. And the evidence shows that children in this case, are being introduced to the Christian faith, developing faith, and accepting Christ through these video games. And this is achieved through teaching theological and biblical literacy through gaming. This is significant as there are very few churches or preachers in this generation that can claim to have millions of attendees, viewers online, or listeners, and even less have a fraction of those responses to accept Christ. This highlights the fact that video games are an effective pedagogy for teaching and tool for sharing the gospel. A recent study from Matthew Puis, who investigated the theological views of young people before and after excessive gameplay, he speaks into this conversation. His study looked into a group of Catholic young people who were involved in church and played Fortnite every day. Puis constructed a theological theme of the afterlife that was prevalent in Fortnite and questioned the young people about their views on the afterlife. The results of the study were that these young people's perception of the afterlife changed from what they were taught in church, according to Catholic tradition, to something more similar to what happens in Fortnite. After you die in the gameplay, you're able to speak to your friends and help them. And they thought that in real life, that when they died, instead of going to heaven and dwelling with Jesus, that they could actually kind of float around their friends and actually give them real world advice and help them in their struggles. And so what this actually tells us is, and what he determined in his research, is that video games are capable of changing the way that we perceive God and therefore making them theological spaces. And I think that this is actually really, really significant. I'm sure Fortnite had no intention of changing people's theology or the way that they view God, but that is actually the result of this excessive gameplay. Furthermore, Pitari and Mary Harkinen argue that organized religion has always used visual, auditory, narrative, and interactive aids to help people make a connection to the transcendent. Games combine all of these and thus have the capability to be influential and immersive emotional experiences that can also trigger religious or spiritual experiences. This perspective demonstrates that there are many ways that Christians can worship which might include interacting with icons, crosses, rosary beads, theologically reflective paintings, carvings, and sculptures again, as well as films and series, and this now includes video games. Other ways that video games are used to introduce people to Christ include esports tournaments. So I personally run games ministry at my church, and we piloted a FIFA tournament with the young people, and we had about 25 unchurched youth come to the tournament. And we kind of did that typical Christian thing, I guess, where we had like a halftime gospel talk. But the truth is over half of those unchurched young people responded to the gospel when given the opportunity, and they accepted Christ. And it was absolutely amazing. And what that means basically is that esports give us an opportunity to share the gospel with individuals that would perhaps never walk into a normal church service. And I think that's great. God Squad Church in the US is a church that operates online and that holds Saturday night services on Twitch. And people have accepted Christ through Pastor Susie's message, and he streams his gameplay regularly. And most recently, Pastor Craig Grichelle from Life Church shared a gospel message in AltSpace VR, and 2 individuals responded. And you know, he was like on the screen, and it was kind of like an amphitheater setting, and it was the avatars that raised their hands. And I think that that is as legitimate as an in-person response. Again, absolutely amazing. And so these insights reveal to us that video games are places of faith. Video games are places where people can be inspired to share their faith, their story, for others to be introduced to Christianity, and where they can develop their faith and can provide an integral opportunity to accept Christ. These are also places of faith because video games are where people are having spiritual experiences and are being drawn closer to God. Yuan Kang from Silicon Valley wrote a PhD thesis on how technology like smartphones and media shape our Christian spirituality. And Heidi Campbell adds, video games reflect and shape contemporary religiosity. And I agree. These experiences are rich in what they offer gamers and in their potential contribution to Christianity. A combination of different media elements, the latest psychological insights, creativity, and innovation built into the latest technology. Video games are unique, and these games are mere glimpses of what the future holds in store for gamers and Christians alike. When combined with the intention or inspiration of sharing a religious element of Christian spirituality, these games offer gamers legitimate spiritual experiences that can evoke emotions similar to religious paintings or film. And this is what the current and future spirituality looks like. Due to the popular rise of video games and the significant amount of Earth's population partaking in these experiences, it is a field that has to be more closely looked at and handled appropriately. With this new theological insight, church leaders and Christians can now have a distinct perspective on video games. Instead of critiquing or condemning them, they can now use video games to share Christ in evangelism or outreach efforts in a creative, innovative, and unique way. Through this understanding, Christians will now better serve all generations. We're living in exciting times. Christianity has now entered the age of the video game. Thank you so much for watching. Bless you guys. Bye.
Cool. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the talk. As you can see, I am no longer in the glass house. I'm in my living room. It's kind of late here in England, and my son's waking up. I don't know if you can hear him. Thank you guys for your kind comments so far. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Preston. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, David. Thank you, Tim. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And I'll just share, I guess, until somebody asks a question. Video games have just been something that I've been, I feel inspired by God to look into a bit closer in relation to our Christian faith. It's been an area that I've been looking at for the last couple of years. And it's like I said in the talk, I've been on a journey studying video games. I've been to different countries. because of this research, and it's just been an absolute blessing. I've got to talk and meet and make friends with some amazing people, and it's just been totally worth it. And there's so many like good, exciting things happening in the world of video games with me personally, and some of the things that I see all of you guys doing. And I definitely think that they're here to stay. Um, and I think it's, like I said, something that we have to. Okay, there's a question popping up. Are you still looking for? Ah, Phil, this is a good one. Yes. Okay, so I live in England, and I'm involved in several different organizations that are making that that run Christian festivals. One of the ones that I am in charge of a video game like area for a Christian festival is called Festival Manchester. It's going to be in Manchester, and it's going to be from the 1st to the 3rd of July. And it's basically a Christian themed like festival season, like music and stuff. It's gonna be loads of like big artists, and we're expected to have 100,000 people like footfall over 3 days. Video game section I'm in charge of. I have a great team that I'm working with. We're gonna do esports tournaments. It's gonna be a gospel talk. Um, Part of the vision is to have a space for video game developers such as yourselves to come and showcase your amazing work. Um, I did ask Phil if he wanted to come. Andy Gears, he's in London. He's going to be over there with him and his team. My friend Joanne Gilchrist, who runs the God for Kids app, is going to be there as well. And so right now, this is an open invitation for any of you, all of you, because I know how difficult it is for you guys to get any type of like positive publicity, any type of recognition that you guys actually deserve. If you guys want to come to Manchester, July 1st to the 3rd, and have a free um, space where you can showcase your project in any stage of development that it is at. You know, if you have a demo, great. If you have a finished thing that you want to sell, great. If you just want to come and chat to people and you want to raise funds and ask people for money, you can do that as well. Um, Email me, message me. I'll make sure that you're set up. I'm not going to charge people anything to come. This is something that is done by a Christian charity that I'm involved with. It's also linked with my church, the message trust. So just please, you know what? I want a strong presence of Christian video game developers. There's so many good projects out there that go unnoticed. And I just want to give you guys a space and a place where you could, you know, people can come and interact with what you do. And so if that's you, please come to Manchester. We'll hang out and just shout me. What gives a player the Christian experience to you? Um, so I guess, you know, that's a bit of a broad question, isn't it? So there's different things that you can do. It's kind of like I mentioned in the talk. Sometimes people try to give a Christian experience through an allegorical theme or story, right? So just friendliness and kindness in general in a game. But I think for what we're talking about and what I was speaking about in relation to the talk of video games being places of faith, it is the intentional um, sharing of Christian spirituality or the gospel message, so that it is not, you know, kind of like a mystery that we're talking about Jesus. I think that it's something that's very upfront, not in your face, obviously. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't want to be the sandwich board preacher in a video game, but I just think the intentionality and the intention as well behind the development. I hope that answers your question. Do you know what, Preston? I saw your comment. Um, I have not seen that. I'm gonna look it up. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that with me. I have not played Droopsy. I'm sorry. I have not. Apologies, mate. My church also has gaming slash esports thing for the youth. Any tips on navigating which games would be appropriate for church or really appropriate for Christians' life in general? Sure, Mr. Hammond. For me, I think that in a church or in a church setting, right? So I'll share that there was a woman. She has like three sons, three kids, and I went up to her in order to try to get more people to come to my event. And I was like, "Hey, Miss, how you doing? I know you got three young boys. Do they play video games?" She's like, "Yeah, of course they do." And I was like, "We're gonna have a video game night. Is it okay if they come? Do you want to come with us? And just like, you can come chill out, play video games as well." And she started laughing at me, and she's just like, "Why would I want my kids to play more video games?" She's like, "They shoot stuff all the time on their own, and they get upset and they get all wound up." And I told her, like, actually, we don't play violent video games. Um, there's a lot of research behind violent video games just having a negative effect on young people and on people in general. It's one of those things where it's kind of like a general fact that overexposure to violence desensitizes you to violence. And so I will not be playing any first person shooters in church. And I don't think that's a bad thing because actually video games are much more bigger and better than that. There's so many games that are absolutely amazing that don't require you to kill anybody or anything. Um, and so, for our first one, all we did was play FIFA, and we had an absolutely amazing time. Then we added Mario Kart, Mario Party, and then we just kind of had free play, and just people just kind of brought their own games, and people just kind of chilled. But I think it's an important message to actually show that as Christians we can game, but we game a bit differently, but it's as legit and it's as fun. Um, because to me, the way that I kind of reason it is like, if Jesus was here today, would Jesus play video games? Like, absolutely, Jesus would play video games. Do you know what I mean? Would Jesus, be playing a video game where you have to kill everybody on the island? Absolutely not. I don't think he would, mate. Do you know what I mean? And I think those are the type of we have to reconcile with these things theologically, and really think about these things and actually what are we showing people. And like I said, I'll give you another tip is like have some cool music. We had a cool gospel soundtrack. We had pizza, cake, brownies, and we even had a band play at the esports tournament. And so it was kind of like a halftime, and it worked great. So music, food, video games. What young person isn't gonna like that? Thank you for your question. The thing about Journey that I think makes it great is the it evokes a sense it induces a sense of awe, right? So there's a lot of moments where you're just like, wow, this is great. It's a bit peaceful, right? It's a languageless, game, great music to it. I know you're a music fan, Andy. Um, I think that like even the ending is something that people are like, wow, that was pretty cool. And also kind of like the simplicity of it. Um, and I think that Genova Chen is obviously very innovative. He's a bit of an entrepreneur, or maybe is that the right word? He's just doing stuff that's different. Do you know what I mean? And he gets inspiration from loads of different things. And I think he understands humanity. Innovator, thank you. Um, I think he just understands human nature and human emotion very well, and he can fine tune games to provoke certain emotions. And if you hear him speak at game developer conferences, he is focused a lot on human emotion, and kind of what's lacking in people, and he incorporates those things in his game design. Um, so I think that yeah, he speaks to human nature very well. I think through the co-play, but also through the peaceful gameplay, because he is also someone who is kind of against violence in video games. You don't really need that in order to have a good game. Thank you. Hold on, let me read this again. Do you have an opinion on games that are crypto Christian, intentionally directed toward Jesus by the developer, but subtly so as to bypass? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. intentionally directed towards Jesus by the developer, but subtly so as to bypass. I think any message that has any game that has the right intention behind it is good. Like I said, there's some games that are very intentional, and there's some that are not. Some people who see a Christian game would just not play it at all, right? Like they would just flat out just say no. And so you do need sometimes different types of games that will subtly, I think, give a gospel message or something of a Christian element to it. I think those things are good. For the sake of this talk, I was kind of just mentioning and focusing on things that are openly Christian. Um, yeah, thank you. Okay, what are your thoughts on trying to reach young, lost kids and finding that most of them are immersed in violent games in our day and age? Should we, as Christians, go toward the lost or hope that they will come towards us? Where is the balance in your opinion? Great question. Yeah, I think go to them. If you mean that go to them means engaging in those games, yeah, sure. Do you know what I mean? Because I find that video games are great icebreakers, conversation starters, and relationship builders. Video games are amazing for those things. And I'll share that, I was in a youth group once, and there was a young person who was very antisocial, very timid, very shy, didn't want to talk to anybody. And when I turned around and I handed him like a controller, like to play PlayStation, he grabbed it immediately and we started playing, and he just became a different person, completely opened up to me. We're playing the game, but we started talking about life, we started talking about school. um, and that was the only way that I could actually get through and across to that young person was, to just play whatever he wanted to play, and it was absolutely fine. Do you know what I mean? I think that the challenge is maybe not staying there, right? Because you don't want your relationship to just only be based on that. Like you do want to take it to the next level. And I think that a lot of kids they play those types of games because that's maybe the only ones that they're exposed to. Like I talk to a lot of parents, and they literally have no clue that video games come in different genres. And I'm like, why don't you just play a non-violent game? They're like, oh, I didn't know they made those. Do you know what I mean? So I think that our job and our duty as Christian gamers and video game developers is still to advocate for healthy gaming, to approach gaming mindfully with the wisdom and discernment that Christ gives us. Do you know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that we don't have fun, and that doesn't mean that we can't have a good time. But for me, a lot of what we do right now is advocating for an alternative to what is commonly seen or done. Thank you. Hello, Tobias. Good question. I have not. There's a couple games that you guys are throwing at me that I need to look into. I have not, Tobias. I apologize. I'd love to know more about it. Um, thank you. Um, I played Ori for a little bit, not enough to actually. I have an Xbox Game Pass, and I have not. Do you know what? I'm gonna make a list of all these things, and I'm gonna have an excuse to play more video games and just tell my wife that it's your guys' fault. Thank you for the questions though and comments. Great. So that was the last question. Again, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the chat. I'll put my email in the chat. The festival is Festival Manchester, July 1st to the 3rd in Manchester, England. If you guys want to come, please, please, please hit me up. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bless you guys. Have a good night. Bye.